Good evening, weary traveler, and welcome once more to a tranquil journey through the quiet, vast, and profoundly unsettling corridors of human history, as the day's last golden light softly, slowly, and peacefully fades away, retreating beyond the distant horizon, and the modern world outside your window begins its gentle, nightly hush. We extend to you a warm invitation. We encourage you to settle deeply, very deeply, into your most comfortable and secure space. Allow your thoughts to gently and serenely unwind, slowly untangling themselves from the day's persistent concerns. Prepare your mind, calmly and patiently, for a truly immersive, yet profoundly tranquil voyage into a time long past, to a world where justice was often brutal, and a single, isolated figure bore the grim, heavy weight of its ultimate, inescapable finality. Tonight, we will venture far, far beyond the hurried, often fragmented rhythm of our contemporary existence. We will turn our gaze, with deliberate intention, towards a pivotal, iconic, and often terrifying figure in European medieval history. The executioner. Specifically, our focus will be on the quiet, cruel life of a medieval executioner. You'd never last a day, providing a deep, meticulous dive into the often unseen, untalked about realities of daily life for this profoundly isolated and feared individual. This is a narrative that seeks to transcend the grand tales of kings and knights, of castles and crusades, and even the dramatic spectacle of public punishment. Instead, we will delve into the harsh, often unyielding, yet deeply repetitive and surprisingly uniform routines that govern the lives of these men, bound by the relentless, predictable, yet powerful demands of their grim profession, of social ostracism, and of the constant, subtle pursuit of their own silent endurance within a world of immense, yet unspoken dread. Imagine, for a long, quiet, contemplative moment, a life dictated not by personal choice or social acceptance, but by the relentless, unceasing demands of a necessary, yet abhorrent, duty. A world where the dawn brought not the promise of companionship or merriment, but the absolute certainty of familiar, isolated conditions, where every precious hour, every single minute was consumed by tasks performed amidst a profound sense of solitude, within homes and workspaces saturated with the subtle, lingering scent of metal, wood, and the memory of their grim work, under the ever-present watchful gaze of a frequently overcast sky or a scorching sun. This was a life of quiet, profound endurance, of deep psychological engagement with a constantly challenging inner world, and of an almost hypnotic monotony that paradoxically can now serve to lull the modern mind into a state of deep calm, a gentle invitation to surrender to a simpler, more arduous, and certainly more somber rhythm of existence. We will explore the subtle yet pervasive sounds of distant city life, the constant creak of tools, the almost unnerving silence of an isolated dwelling, and the rhythmic clang of cold steel, all intimately experienced through the humble, yet indispensable hands of the medieval executioner. This is a story not of heroic battles or dramatic political intrigues, but of the silent, persistent grind of daily existence of the human spirit's quiet resilience in the face of overwhelming social stigma, profound psychological pressure, and the chilling, predictable routines of administering ultimate justice. It is a narrative woven from countless threads of physical effort, of ceaseless repetitive motions, and of the subtle yet ever-present challenges of basic survival, of maintaining a household and of navigating a world where pain was a constant companion, often ignored, and where one's very profession marked them as an outcast. It is designed to be a gentle lullaby, an invitation for your own mind to find its perfect stillness, allowing the rhythmic, unceasing sounds and detailed, often startling, sensations of a bygone era to guide you towards a truly restorative rest. So now, as you listen, breathe deeply, very deeply, letting your chest gently rise and fall with each breath. Feel the comforting, soft weight of your blanket surrounding you, wrapping you in a cocoon of warmth and security. Feel the gentle, steady rhythm of your own breath, a quiet anchor in the present moment. And finally, allow your mind to simply drift, to slowly, peacefully begin its imagined journey into this rugged, ancient, and profoundly tranquil historical landscape. Let the whispers of a forgotten isolation and the imagined echoes of countless lonely footsteps guide your thoughts serenely and without haste towards a state of profound stillness, ultimate peace, and a truly restful, dream-filled sleep. Having gently settled ourselves into the contemplation of a bygone era, allowing our minds to slowly drift towards the vast open landscapes of human endeavor, let us now transport our thoughts calmly and with profound understanding to the very edge of medieval society, to a realm of immense enforced isolation. We are about to immerse ourselves, not in the bustling markets or grand castles, but in the raw, relentless, and profoundly revealing reality of daily existence for a singular, feared, and often reviled individual: the medieval executioner. This is a story of sheer quiet endurance, of sensory immersion in a world fundamentally bound to a grim duty, and of the unique kind of psychological weariness that only constant social ostracism can induce, a weariness so deep it might paradoxically lull your own mind into a profound and dreamless sleep. Imagine, for a long, quiet moment, the very start of such a day for a medieval executioner, deeply rooted in the ancient patterns of existence, yet far removed from any sense of normal human connection. The hour is impossibly early, long before the first hint of golden light has even begun to paint the cold, grey eastern sky, which is still shrouded in the deep, cool, indigo blue of pre-dawn. You are awakened not by a jarring alarm, nor by the subtle shift in air, but by the profound, internal clock of your own isolated existence, a rhythm attuned to the necessities of a life set apart. Perhaps the distant mournful hoot of an owl now retreating as light approaches, or the faint, almost imperceptible murmur of the wind rustling through the gallows structure on the nearby hill gently pulls you back from the depths of sleep. Your small, simple, often solitary home, typically located on the absolute outskirts of the town or village, a place where no respectable citizen would willingly reside, feels cool and dark, its thick walls holding the night's coolness against the encroaching morning warmth. The air within carries a complex, earthy, comforting scent: dried mud, old straw from the sleeping mats, wood smoke lingering from last night's small central fire in the hearth, and the subtle, unmistakable aroma of persistent isolation, a blend of stale air and the faint metallic temps of old steel from your grim tools. There is no soft, yielding bed to linger in. Your sleeping mat, woven from coarse straw or rushes, lies directly on the packed earth floor, offering only a firm, utilitarian comfort. Its rough texture, a constant, subtle reminder of your outcast station. You rise slowly, stiffly, your muscles perhaps aching with a deep, persistent soreness from yesterday's hidden duties, or the lingering tension of your existence, a low, constant thrum of fatigue already present deep within your limbs. The floor beneath your bare feet is cool, rough earth, its uneven texture familiar against your soles, perhaps even slightly damp or gritty. The process of preparing for the day is quick, efficient, and deeply habitual, utterly devoid of any lingering luxury or modern convenience of personal care, particularly for an individual so profoundly stigmatized. There is no running water piped into your dwelling. There is no private latrine, no indoor plumbing. Instead, you might have a simple wooden bucket or a rough clay pot of water, brought from a solitary well or nearby stream the previous evening, always fetched in the quiet, desolate hours to avoid casual encounters with others. Imagine splashing a meager handful of cold, often murky, water onto your face, feeling its sharp, bracing coolness awaken your skin, a fleeting moment of raw freshness quickly absorbed by the dry, still morning air, leaving behind only the subtle scent of damp earth and stale morning air. Your hair, coarse and practical, often long and unkempt, is quickly smoothed with your fingers, perhaps still matted from sleep. Your clothing is simple, unadorned, reflecting your outcast status and the demands of your grim profession. A rough woolen tunic or a homespun linen shift, perhaps a pair of coarse woolen breeches or leggings garments, chosen for their durability against rough work and persistent wear rather than for any comfort or appearance. Its fabric feels thick, almost stiff against your body, a familiar, unchanging sensation that defines your daily attire, and often carries the faint, ingrained scent of wood smoke, sweat, and the subtle, metallic tang of your trade. The air in the tiny hut is still heavy, filled with the quiet, anticipatory hum of the impending workday. There is little time for idle conversation. The profound silence of your isolated household is broken only by your own soft breathing and the subtle rustle of worn clothing as you prepare to face the monumental, unspoken tasks ahead. Breakfast, a crucial source of raw energy for the grueling hours ahead, is meager and quickly consumed, often in the chilling solitude of your own hearth. It consists primarily of basic, nourishing staples, reflecting the pragmatic bounty, or scarcity, of the land, though often supplemented by small payments in kind from the town for your services. Perhaps a piece of dark, hard, unleavened bread, its texture rough and dense against your tongue, softened with a few sips of simple, unfiltered water or weak ale, or perhaps a small bowl of thick, warm gruel, made from boiled oats, barley, or peas, tasting faintly of earth and smoke from the hearth. The aromas are simple, earthy, utilitarian, reflecting the direct, unadorned bounty of the immediate land. This meal is not consumed for pleasure or social enjoyment, but purely for fundamental sustenance, providing the minimal, essential fuel necessary for your body to endure the long demanding hours ahead. It is consumed swiftly, silently, almost mechanically, a direct reflection of the day's unyielding schedule. There is no lingering, no extended conversation. The focus is entirely on the quick intake of calories, before the sun begins its relentless ascent, and the grim duties, or the pervasive solitude, call out for your silent labor. The morning relief of bodily functions, a universally necessary act, was handled by the executioner in profound isolation, contributing massively to the pervasive squalor of their segregated existence. There was no concept of a flushing toilet or a private outhouse in most medieval dwellings, and for the executioner, privacy was not a luxury, but a necessity to avoid contact. Waste was often disposed of directly into a solitary ditch, into a designated midden or refuse pile just outside the hut, or into a simple cesspit, always far removed from any other human dwelling. Imagine the earthy, pungent, and profoundly unpleasant odor that would hang perpetually in the air around these isolated areas, especially on a warm, still morning. The subtle buzzing of flies, drawn to the waste, would be a constant, irritating sound. The ground itself, around the hut or in the desolate paths, would be a constant, subtle hazard, often muddy and slippery with a mixture of animal dung, human waste, and household refuse. The sheer practicality of medieval life dictated a certain tolerance for such pervasive odors and unsanitary conditions. For the executioner, this was simply part of their isolated, self-contained world. This routine, though natural, contributed massively to the pervasive, unwashed reality of their existence, a continuous, inescapable part of daily life, profoundly challenging to any modern sense of personal space and cleanliness. The core of an executioner's life, while not actively performing their grim duties, revolved around the meticulous maintenance of their tools. This was not merely a chore, it was a sacred, almost meditative, ritual. Imagine spending countless hours in a small, isolated workshop attached to your hut, or perhaps within the hut itself. The air here would be thick with a distinct, metallic scent of cold steel, of grinding stone, and of fine polishing oil. Your tools are laid out before you on a rough wooden workbench. Heavy axes, long ropes, perhaps branding irons, various bladed instruments, and the implements for the gallows or execution block. You would grasp a heavy axe, its cold steel head smooth beneath your calloused fingers, its wooden handle worn from use. With a slow, rhythmic motion, you would begin to sharpen its blade with a wet grinding stone, its coarse surface slowly, persistently, honing the edge. The rhythmic, grating sound of steel against stone, the gentle hiss of water on the blade, the soft spray of fine metallic dust. These would be the constant, almost hypnotic sounds of your meticulous work. This was a physical, demanding, yet profoundly repetitive task, designed to ensure absolute precision and lethal efficiency. Beyond sharpening, each tool required careful cleaning and oiling. Imagine taking a heavy rope, its thick fibers rough against your hands, and meticulously cleaning it of any lingering traces, then carefully coiling it for storage, or perhaps polishing a branding iron, its metal gleaming faintly in the dim light, carefully applying a thin layer of oil to prevent rust. The sounds would be soft, the rhythmic rub of a polishing cloth on metal, the gentle clink of steel implements, the soft rustle of cloths. This was not a quick task, but a slow, deliberate act of preparing for future duties, an unending cycle of maintenance that filled the long, solitary hours. The pervasive smell of metal, of oil, of leather would fill the small workshop, an unchanging, grim part of your sensory world. The deep social ostracism faced by the executioner profoundly shaped every aspect of their daily life, making even mundane tasks an ordeal of isolation. While their services were necessary to enforce justice or perceived justice, they were universally feared, despised, and avoided by the general populace. Imagine walking along the edge of a village path, not through the bustling center, but along its desolate perimeter, your head bowed slightly, your gaze averted. The sounds of a distant village market, the low murmur of voices, the laughter of children, would reach you as faint, unreachable echoes, a constant reminder of the normal human society from which you were irrevocably separated. People would instinctively turn away as you approached, cross to the other side of the street, or fall silent. His very presence would evoke a profound sense of unease and dread. The sounds of his footsteps on the street would cause others to subtly quicken their pace, to avert their gaze, creating a continuous, subtle atmosphere of ostracism. This was a life lived in a perpetual state of quiet solitude, a profound psychological burden that permeated every aspect of his daily existence. Even obtaining basic provisions for your household was an exercise in quiet negotiation and enforced solitude. You could not openly shop in the bustling market square, haggle with vendors, or engage in casual conversation. Instead, your food and supplies would often be left for you at a designated solitary spot outside the main village, or delivered by a specific, often reluctant, intermediary. Imagine approaching a quiet, prearranged spot, finding a small sack of grain, a few vegetables, or a small portion of meat left by a fearful villager, their footsteps having already receded into the distance. The sounds would be minimal. The rustle of the sack, the soft crunch of your own footsteps on the earth, the profound silence of a transaction conducted without human presence. This was a quiet, daily humiliation, a constant reminder of your outcast status, but a necessary part of survival, ensuring you could continue your solitary existence. For an executioner, even the moments of leisure were often imbued with this profound solitude. There were no social gatherings to attend, no communal feasts, no lively taverns where you could relax among friends. Instead, leisure might involve long, solitary walks through the desolate fields or the quiet woods surrounding your isolated dwelling. Imagine walking slowly, deliberately, listening to the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees, the distant cries of wild animals, the rhythmic crunch of your own boots on the earth. Your thoughts would be your only companions, a constant internal monologue. This forced solitude, this immense quietude could lead to a deep meditative state, a profound connection with the self and the vastness of nature, or it could amplify any underlying anxieties, emphasizing your complete dependence on your own internal fortitude. The pervasive feeling was one of being perpetually alone, of moving through a world that needed you, yet simultaneously abhorred you. The upbringing of an executioner's children, if they had any, was also deeply shaped by this pervasive stigma. Often the profession was passed down from father to son, trapping entire families in this cycle of social ostracism. Imagine a child growing up in this isolated hut, their playmates limited, their interactions with other village children often met with fear, whispers, or outright avoidance. They would slowly internalize their family's unique and grim role in society, understanding from a young age the silent barrier that separated them from others. The sounds of other children's distant laughter, their innocent games, would reach them as faint, wistful echoes, a constant reminder of a normal childhood they could never fully experience. This enforced isolation, this constant social distancing, formed a unique and profound psychological burden on the entire family. a quiet, continuous struggle for acceptance in a world that inherently rejected them. As the sun began its slow, gradual descent towards the western horizon, painting the sky with fiery oranges, deep purples, and soft fading blues, the air gradually, slowly, began to cool again, bringing with it the damp, pervasive chill of the medieval night. The shadows lengthened, stretching endlessly across the deserted fields and through the lonely paths leading to your hut, before finally, inevitably, merging into the complete, profound darkness of night. The executioner, weary from his day of meticulous tool maintenance, profound solitude, and the constant psychological burden of ostracism, would slowly prepare for the evening. The sounds of the hut at night would be the soft rhythmic breathing of his family if he had one, the gentle crackling of a dying fire in the hearth, the subtle creak of old timbers as the hut responded to the cooling night air, and the distant, muffled calls of nocturnal animals from the surrounding forest, all blending into a soothing natural lullaby. This deep, shared sleep, born of an entire day of unyielding discipline, constant service, profound emotional adaptation, and the persistent weight of social stigma, prepared his body for the inevitable, relentless rhythm of the coming dawn, knowing that tomorrow the sun would rise again, and the endless, silent, demanding routines of a medieval executioner's life, with all its cruel realities and profound isolation, would simply, quietly continue guiding him, through sheer weariness, towards a deep, restorative sleep, a peaceful surrender to the ancient, eternal patterns of existence. Having deeply immersed ourselves in the stark, unyielding realities of the medieval executioner's daily life, feeling the persistent isolation that defined their existence, sensing the pervasive odors of wood smoke and old tools in their secluded dwelling, and understanding the profound psychological demands of their unique, often abhorrent, profession, let us now, slowly and with a profound shift in perspective, turn our gaze. We are about to step into a vastly different, yet equally disciplined and profoundly grim realm within the same ancient civilization. The public spectacle of medieval justice, specifically focusing on the ritualized processes of execution and the silent, heavy role of the executioner within them. This is a narrative that seeks to transcend romanticized notions of swift, dramatic punishment, delving instead into the harsh, often unyielding, yet deeply repetitive and surprisingly uniform protocols that governed every aspect of these final solemn acts. It was a world where immense societal power intersected with profound personal fate, creating unique and pervasive psychological challenges that would profoundly test the very sensibilities of a modern individual, even amidst such controlled, ritualized violence. Imagine, for a long, quiet moment, the setting for a medieval public execution. This was not a private affair, not a hidden act, but a deeply public, deeply ritualized event, often drawing large crowds from the city and surrounding villages, sometimes even from distant towns, eager to witness the spectacle of justice being dispensed. The execution ground, often a permanent fixture just outside the city walls, on a prominent hill, or a temporary scaffold meticulously erected in a main public square, would be carefully prepared. The gallows, a sturdy wooden structure, often crudely fashioned yet immensely functional, stood tall and stark against the sky, its heavy timbers creaking faintly in the breeze, a silent monument to the power of the law. The execution block, a solid rough-hewn piece of oak or other hardwood, would be placed, centrally, often positioned to give the maximum visibility to the assembled crowd, its surface worn smooth by countless prior uses, perhaps even stained with ancient dark marks. The air would be heavy with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense of anticipation and dread. Mingled with the pervasive smells of the city, wood smoke, human effluvia, animal waste, and the faint, metallic tang of iron, the sounds would be a low, continuous murmur of the gathered crowd, their voices hushed with a complex mixture of morbid curiosity, profound fear, a sense of solemnity, and sometimes even a strange, quiet excitement, punctuated by the gentle rustle of their rough woolen clothing, the distant snort of a horse, or the soft clang of a blacksmith making last-minute repairs to a piece of iron for the day. This atmosphere of subdued, yet intense, public expectation, meticulously managed by city officials and guards, was designed to impart a profound, unforgettable lesson about the absolute finality and brutal certainty of medieval justice. The preparation of the executioner for such a grim spectacle was itself a long, deliberate, and deeply ritualistic affair, spanning many hours, often beginning before the first hint of dawn. Imagine the executioner, in the quiet solitude of his secluded dwelling, undergoing the painstaking process of preparing his tools. This was not a quick single act, driven by haste or emotion, but a slow, methodical layering of dozens of individual pieces, each chosen for a specific purpose. He would carefully select his axe, its heavy steel head polished to a grim, mirror-like sheen, its edge sharpened to an almost inhuman keenness, capable of a swift, clean strike. The grinding of the blade against a whetstone, a rhythmic, abrasive, rasping sound, would fill the quiet room, a constant, repetitive motion that demanded immense physical effort, unwavering precision, and a profound mental focus. He would test the sharpness with a soft, careful touch of his thumb, drawing it lightly along the edge, ensuring its absolute readiness. The heavy, thick rope for the gallows would be inspected, its thick, coarse fibers tested meticulously for strength. Its knot meticulously tied and retied, ensuring it would hold under immense weight. The various smaller instruments, perhaps for torture or dismemberment if the sentence demanded it, or for the display of body parts, would be laid out with methodical calm, each tool inspected for its readiness, its surface cool and hard beneath his touch. The sounds would be soft, the gentle clink of metal on metal, the subtle creak of a leather sheath, the rhythmic rasp of the whetstone, its dry, abrasive sound filling the otherwise silent room. This entire process, spanning an hour or more, was a continuous act of transformation, a quiet ritual of preparing for the grim duties ahead, a silent communication with the cold, unyielding, and profoundly effective instruments of justice. Once his tools were prepared and meticulously arranged, the executioner himself would dress in his distinctive attire, carefully chosen for its symbolic and practical functions. This often included a dark hood or a heavy mask, designed specifically to conceal his identity from the assembled crowd, shielding his personal self from the profound public hatred and fear that his role inevitably attracted. He would wear heavy, practical clothing, perhaps a thick leather tunic or a rough woolen jerkin, offering both protection during his work and allowing for unhindered, precise movement. His hands, often gloved in thick leather, would be strong and calloused, accustomed to the immense weight and feel of his tools, their grip firm and unyielding. His face hidden behind the impassive dark mask would convey a sense of silent professionalism, a chilling detachment from the profound human drama unfolding around him, transforming him into merely an instrument of the law, a silent, grim figure of ultimate authority, whose very presence commanded both fear and a reluctant, unspoken respect. The sounds would be soft, the gentle rustle of his coarse clothing, the subtle creak of leather straps, the rhythmic rasp of heavy fabric. This was a continuous act of shedding his personal identity, becoming merely a symbol, a chilling embodiment of the state's power, a figure of profound solitude even in the midst of a crowd. The procession of the condemned, from the castle or prison to the execution ground, was a profoundly ritualized and often slow, somber journey, meticulously designed to be a public spectacle of warning. Imagine the condemned, perhaps a peasant or a lesser noble, often bound with heavy ropes or chains, sometimes stripped to the waist or dressed in a simple coarse, white tunic, being led slowly, deliberately through the narrow, winding, unpaved streets of the city. The sounds would be minimal, the rhythmic shuffle of their feet, often bare or in worn clogs, the quiet clinking of chains, the low, pervasive murmur of the accompanying guards, their footsteps heavy and measured. The crowd, lining the streets in dense, silent rows, would often be hushed, their voices subdued, their gaze fixed intently on the condemned, a mixture of curiosity, fear, and solemnity on their faces. Sometimes, a priest or friar would walk alongside, murmuring quiet prayers, holding up a crucifix, offering final spiritual solace and a last chance for repentance. The sounds of distant church bells, tolling mournfully with a deep, resonant, slow rhythm, would add to the somber atmosphere, marking the slow, inexorable journey towards finality, a chilling countdown. This deliberate public march was designed not only as punishment but as a stark, silent, unforgettable warning to the assembled populace. A dramatic and chilling display of the inescapable power of medieval law and the ultimate consequences of transgression. Upon finally reaching the execution ground, the ritual would unfold with a terrifying, formal quietude, a chilling precision. Imagine the condemned being led to the foot of the gallows or the execution block, their steps slow and heavy. The executioner, a silent, hooded figure, would already be standing ready, his heavy axe resting silently on the block, its polished steel gleaming dully in the light, or the noose hanging ominously from the gallows beam. The sounds would be a profound, all-encompassing silence from the vast crowd, a palpable, almost suffocating stillness that preceded the ultimate act of justice. The final pronouncement of the sentence, if any, would be made by a judge or a herald, their voice clear, sharp, and resonant, echoing across the silent ground, emphasizing the gravity of the moment. Then the condemned would be prepared. If by hanging, the rope would be placed meticulously around their neck by the executioner, his gloved hands moving with grim precision. If by beheading, they would be led to the block, their head placed carefully upon its worn, rough surface, a heavy, unyielding object. The executioner's movements would be slow, deliberate, precise, devoid of any haste or overt emotion, transforming him into a silent, efficient, and terrifying instrument of death, fulfilling his grim duty with a chilling professional calm. The moment of execution itself, though swift in its finality, was often preceded by an agonizing formal pause, designed to maximize psychological impact. Imagine the executioner, his heavy axe raised high, its polished steel blade glinting ominously in the light, reflecting the silent, upturned faces of the crowd. The silence from the vast crowd would be absolute, a profound, almost unbearable stillness, broken only by the gentle whisper of the wind, the soft creak of the gallows timbers, and perhaps the faint, ragged breath of the condemned. This agonizing pause, a moment of profound, shared anticipation and dread, was designed to maximize the psychological impact on both the condemned and the thousands of witnesses, imprinting the lesson of finality. Then, with a single, powerful, downward swing, executed with immense, controlled force, the axe would descend. The sound would be a dull, heavy thud as it struck the block, or the sharp, sickening snap of a rope. A collective gasp, a sudden sharp intake of breath from the crowd, would momentarily break the profound silence, followed by a low, pervasive murmur as the crowd gradually began to process the brutal, undeniable finality of the act, its implications settling heavily upon them. After the execution, the grim task of displaying the body, or parts of it, often followed, serving as a further, silent, and long-lasting warning to any who would contemplate transgression. Imagine the executioner or his assistants performing these final tasks with calm, methodical efficiency, hoisting the body onto the gallows for prolonged display, or placing the severed head on a pike at the city gates. The sounds would be minimal: the gentle creak of ropes, the soft thud of a body being moved, the muffled murmur of the dispersing crowd, their conversations hushed, their steps slow. The body, left exposed to the elements, would stand as a stark, silent testament to the unforgiving nature of medieval justice, a chilling, continuous reminder of the consequences of crime, visible to all who entered or left the city. This was not merely an act of punishment, it was a deeply symbolic public spectacle, meticulously designed to instill profound fear and absolute obedience, all within a framework of chilling, often profound, silence, a grim tableau of imperial power. The executioner's unique and often abhorrent position within medieval society was profoundly isolating, marking every interaction and shaping every daily task. He lived on the absolute fringes, often in a segregated dwelling outside the city walls, in a specific designated quarter of the city, or even entirely alone in a desolate area, universally shunned and deeply feared by the general populace. Imagine the profound silence that would perpetually surround his home, broken only by the sounds of his own family, if he had one, or the distant muffled sounds of the city. he served an unreachable world of normal human connection. People would instinctively avert their gaze, would cross the street to avoid passing near him, or would fall into a sudden, uncomfortable silence if he approached. His very presence would evoke a profound sense of unease, dread, and deep revulsion. The sounds of his footsteps on the street would cause others to subtly quicken their pace, to instinctively avert their gaze, creating a continuous, subtle atmosphere of ostracism, a palpable social distance. This was a life lived in a perpetual state of quiet solitude, a profound psychological burden that permeated every aspect of his daily existence, a constant reminder of his outcast status. The long-term psychological impact of this isolated, grim profession on the executioner himself was immense and pervasive. Imagine the profound quiet that would fill his mind during the long hours between executions, wrestling with the grim nature of his duties, the profound moral implications of his actions, and the pervasive fear and hatred directed towards him. He was a necessary evil, an instrument of the law, yet profoundly human in his capacity for thought and feeling. The sounds would be minimal, the soft creak of his tools, the distant murmur of the wind, the rhythmic beat of his own heart, all blending into a profound, internal solitude. This continuous, internal struggle, performed in profound silence, defined much of his existence, a quiet burden of unspoken anxieties and constant self-regulation. Yet he continued his duties year after year, bound by an inescapable contract, by a grim inherited duty, a testament to his own unique form of silent endurance, a life lived in the shadows of the very justice he administered. The silence of the execution ground, once the grim spectacle was complete and the crowds had dispersed, would be deep and absolute. The sounds of the city would slowly return, but muted, distant, as if respecting the profound stillness that now permeated the site. The wind would whisper through the gallows, the birds would slowly return to their perches, and the subtle sounds of nature would reclaim their dominion. This profound quietude, lingering long after the event, would serve as a chilling reminder of the lives that had ended there, and of the silent figure who had performed the ultimate act of medieval justice. As the sun began its slow, gradual descent towards the western horizon, painting the sky with fiery oranges, deep purples, and soft fading blues, the air gradually, slowly, began to cool again, bringing with it the damp, pervasive chill of the medieval night. The shadows lengthened, stretching endlessly across the deserted execution ground and through the lonely paths leading to your hut, before finally, inevitably, merging into the complete, profound darkness of night. The executioner, weary from his day of meticulous tool maintenance, profound solitude, and the constant psychological burden of ostracism, would slowly prepare for the evening. The sounds of the hut at night would be the soft, rhythmic breathing of his family if he had one, the gentle crackling of a dying fire in the hearth, the subtle creak of old timbers as the hut responded to the cooling night air, and the distant, muffled calls of nocturnal animals from the surrounding forest, all blending into a soothing, natural lullaby. This deep, shared sleep, born of an entire day of unyielding discipline, constant service, profound emotional adaptation, and the persistent weight of social stigma, prepared his body for the inevitable, relentless rhythm of the coming dawn, knowing that tomorrow the sun would rise again, and the endless, silent, demanding routines of a medieval executioner's life, with all its cruel realities and profound isolation, would simply, quietly continue guiding him, through sheer weariness, towards a deep, restorative sleep, a peaceful surrender to the ancient, eternal patterns of existence. Having deeply immersed ourselves in the stark, unyielding realities of the medieval executioner's daily life, feeling the persistent isolation that defined their existence, sensing the pervasive odors of wood smoke and old tools in their secluded dwelling, and then contemplating the grim spectacle and silent solemnity of the ritualized processes of execution, let us now, slowly and with a profound shift in perspective, turn our gaze. We are about to step into a vastly different yet equally disciplined and profoundly poignant realm within the same ancient civilization. The pervasive social ostracism and the inherited stigma that profoundly shaped the entire life and indeed the lineage of the medieval executioner This is a narrative that seeks to transcend romanticized notions of justice, delving instead into the harsh, often unyielding, yet deeply repetitive and surprisingly uniform protocols of social exclusion that governed every aspect of an executioner's existence, from their interactions in the marketplace to the very marriage of their children. It was a world where immense societal need intersected with profound personal rejection, creating unique and pervasive psychological challenges that would profoundly test the very sensibilities of a modern individual, even amidst such a life of grim, necessary duty. Imagine, for a long, quiet moment, the medieval town or city where an executioner resided. Despite his essential role in maintaining law and order, enforcing the will of the Lord or the city council, he was universally regarded as an outcast, a figure of profound fear, revulsion, and deep moral contamination. His very presence would evoke a palpable sense of unease, a silent dread that permeated any space he entered. This was not a temporary social awkwardness. It was a permanent, inherited stigma, a brand upon his very being that separated him irrevocably from the rest of society. Imagine walking along a narrow, bustling street, hearing the familiar murmur of voices, the clatter of carts, the laughter of children. Then, a sudden, inexplicable hush falls over a section of the crowd. Heads subtly turn away. Conversations abruptly cease. People instinctively step aside, creating an invisible, yet undeniable, cordon around a solitary figure making his way through the marketplace. This profound silence, this sudden void in the social fabric, was the constant, daily companion of the executioner, a chilling reminder of his perpetual otherness. The executioner was often legally, or at least customarily, forced to live in a segregated dwelling. Imagine his small, often humble home, typically located on the absolute outskirts of the town or village, frequently near the gallows or the common refuse pile, a place where no respectable citizen would willingly reside. The reasons were practical, but also deeply symbolic. To distance the unclean from the clean, to prevent the perceived moral contamination from spreading, the sounds around his home would be sparse, predominantly the natural sounds of the deserted periphery, the whisper of the wind through dried grass, the distant calls of unseen birds, or the occasional creak of the gallows structure itself. The subtle, persistent murmur of the city, its life and vibrancy, would reach him only as faint, unreachable echoes, a constant, poignant reminder of the normal human society from which he was irrevocably separated. This enforced isolation, this profound physical and social distancing, was not merely a living arrangement, it was a psychological burden, a constant, chilling reminder of his perpetual outcast status. Even the most mundane, necessary acts of daily life for the executioner were fraught with the challenges of this pervasive stigma. Obtaining basic provisions for his household was an exercise in quiet negotiation and enforced solitude. He could not openly shop in the bustling market square, haggle with vendors, or engage in casual conversation like any other citizen. Instead, his food and supplies would often be left for him at a designated solitary spot just outside the main village gates, or delivered by a specific, often reluctant, intermediary, a person paid to brave the contamination. Imagine the executioner approaching a quiet, prearranged spot, perhaps at dawn or dusk, finding a small sack of grain, a few vegetables, or a small portion of meat left by a fearful villager, their footsteps having already receded into the distance. The sounds would be minimal, the rustle of the sack, the soft crunch of his own footsteps on the earth, the profound silence of a transaction conducted without direct human presence. This was a quiet, daily humiliation, a constant reminder of his outcast status, but a necessary part of survival, ensuring he could continue his solitary existence. The concept of untouchability often implicitly applied to the executioner. It was believed by many that touching an executioner, or even his tools, could bring bad luck, contamination, or even physical illness. This belief created a profound physical barrier between him and the rest of society. Imagine a child, perhaps playing near the edge of town, suddenly seeing the executioner approaching. Their play would instantly cease. They would run, perhaps with a quiet gasp of fear, back to their parents, warned from a young age to avoid contact. Adults would cross the street, avert their gaze, or hurry past with their heads down. This pervasive social distancing was not a temporary phenomenon. It was a continuous, daily reality, shaping every public interaction, every moment spent outside his secluded dwelling. The subtle sounds of hurried footsteps, the sudden silence of a crowd, the averted gazes, these were the constant, silent signals of his profound rejection. The profession of executioner was often hereditary, passed down from father to son through generations, trapping entire families in this cycle of profound social ostracism. Imagine a child growing up in the executioner's isolated hut, their playmates limited, their interactions with other village children often met with fear, whispers, or outright avoidance. They would slowly internalize their family's unique and grim role in society, understanding from a young age the silent barrier that separated them from others. They would learn through bitter experience that their very name, their very lineage, carried a profound stigma. The sounds of other children's distant laughter, their innocent games, would reach them as faint, wistful echoes, a constant reminder of a normal childhood they could never fully experience. This enforced isolation, this constant social distancing, formed a unique and profound psychological burden on the entire family. A quiet, continuous struggle for acceptance in a world that inherently rejected them, perpetuating the curse through generations. Marriage for the executioner and his children was also severely constrained, often only possible within a very narrow, specific social circle. They could not marry into respectable families from the local village or town. Instead, they were often forced to marry within other outcast families, perhaps the executioner from a neighboring town, or families involved in similarly stigmatized professions like knackers, those who disposed of dead animals, or grave diggers. Imagine the somber arrangements, the quiet negotiations for such unions, devoid of the joyous celebrations and wide social gatherings of other medieval weddings. The sounds of such a wedding would be subdued, the laughter less boisterous, the guests few and similarly outcast. This ensured the perpetuation of their cursed lineage, a cycle of stigma that was almost impossible to break, binding them to their grim fate. The medieval church, while offering spiritual solace to all, often treated executioners with a peculiar ambivalence. While their role was necessary for the enforcement of divine and secular law, their direct involvement in taking human life was seen as profoundly polluting. Imagine the executioner attending Mass, perhaps sitting in a segregated section of the church, his presence acknowledged but subtly set apart. He might be denied certain sacraments, or subjected to specific penances, his spiritual life a constant struggle with his grim duties. The sounds of the Mass, the rhythmic chanting, the soft murmur of prayers, would reach him, but always with the underlying awareness of his unique spiritual burden. This created an additional layer of isolation, a spiritual distancing that reinforced his social ostracism, making even the promise of salvation a complex, quiet challenge. The long-term psychological impact of this pervasive social ostracism on the executioner was immense and profound. Imagine the profound quiet that would fill his mind during the long hours between executions, wrestling with the nature of his duties, the moral implications of his actions, and the pervasive fear and hatred directed towards him. He was a necessary evil, an instrument of the law, yet profoundly human. The sounds would be minimal. The soft creak of his tools, the distant murmur of the wind, the rhythmic beat of his own heart, all blending into a profound, internal solitude. This continuous, internal struggle, performed in profound silence, defined much of his existence, a quiet burden of unspoken anxieties and constant The pervasive feeling was one of being perpetually alone, of moving through a world that needed him, yet simultaneously abhorred him, a constant, subtle, psychological torment. The executioner was often, by necessity, a skilled craftsman, creating many of his own tools. Imagine the pride, tinged with a deep melancholy. He might take in the meticulous craftsmanship of an axe, its blade perfectly balanced, its handle smoothly polished. These were not just instruments of death, they were extensions of his skill, testament to his quiet dedication to his profession. He might also engage in other forms of craft, such as tanning leather or rudimentary butchery. Skills often considered similarly unclean, but necessary for his survival. These quiet, manual labors filled his solitary hours, providing a sense of purpose and a distraction from the pervasive social stigma. The rhythmic sounds of hammering, of grinding, of scraping would fill his isolated workshop, a personal symphony of solitary creation. The grim duties of an executioner also extended beyond official executions to the performance of various forms of torture, administered to extract confessions or as part of judicial punishment. Imagine the cold, impersonal application of various instruments, thumbscrews, racks, branding irons, designed to inflict precise, controlled pain. This was not a chaotic frenzy, but a methodical, often slow, process, performed under the watchful eyes of officials. The sounds would be minimal: the creak of the rack, the low groans of the accused, the soft murmur of interrogators. The executioner, as a professional, would perform these tasks with the same detached precision as an execution, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, contributing to a profound psychological burden that silently accumulated over years of such grim work. The enduring legacy of the medieval executioner, though chilling and deeply stained by social stigma, is a profound testament to the harsh, often brutal, nature of justice in a bygone era, and to the unique human capacity for performing grim, necessary duties in the name of social order. They remind us that even the most fundamental aspects of justice were once administered with a profound, terrifying finality, and that human lives in their fleeting existence were profoundly shaped by the visible display of such power and the inescapable weight of social judgment. These grim figures, often overlooked in the grand narratives of history, stand as quiet monuments to societal order, to the unforgiving nature of medieval law, and to the profound, often unsettling quietude that accompanied their work. Their silent tools, their isolated dwellings, and the subtle echoes of long-vanished punishments and pervasive social rejection continued to whisper tales of quiet enterprise and patient survival, inviting deep contemplation on a unique and profoundly sobering chapter of human history. And as you contemplate the quiet rhythms and the enduring solitude of these remote medieval figures, may your own mind find a similar stillness, a deep sense of calm, preparing you gently for a truly restful and dream-filled sleep, a peaceful surrender to the ancient eternal patterns of existence. Having deeply immersed ourselves in the stark, unyielding realities of the medieval executioner's daily life, feeling the persistent isolation that defined their existence, sensing the pervasive odors of wood smoke and old tools in their secluded dwelling, having then contemplated the grim spectacle and silent solemnity of the ritualized processes of execution, and explored the pervasive social ostracism and the profound inherited stigma that marked them as outcasts, let us now, slowly and with a profound shift in perspective, turn our gaze. We are about to step into a vastly different, yet equally disciplined and profoundly poignant realm within the same ancient civilization: the complex, paradoxical role of the executioner within the broader feudal society, and the enduring, often silent, burden carried by his family. This is a narrative that seeks to transcend simple notions of villainy, delving instead into the harsh, often unyielding, yet deeply repetitive and surprisingly uniform protocols that governed the integration of this feared figure into the very fabric of medieval power structures, and the profound psychological legacy that often passed from generation to generation. It was a world where immense societal need intersected with profound personal rejection, creating unique and pervasive psychological challenges that would profoundly test the very sensibilities of a modern individual, even amidst such a life of grim, necessary duty. Imagine, for a long, quiet moment, the bustling heart of a medieval city, perhaps during a market day. The sounds are a low, continuous murmur of voices, the clatter of carts, the occasional shouts of vendors, the distant chiming of church bells. In this vibrant tapestry of life, the executioner played a peculiar, almost contradictory role. He was, in essence, a civic official, an employee of the town council or the local lord, holding a specific, contracted position within the feudal hierarchy. His existence was not merely tolerated, it was a fundamental necessity for the maintenance of law, order, and the lord's authority. He was an integral, albeit despised, part of the state's apparatus. Imagine the official documents, meticulously penned by a scribe, detailing his appointment, his duties, and his salary, often paid in kind, with grain, timber, or even certain privileges. This bureaucratic acknowledgement of his role stood in stark contrast to his social rejection, a paradox that defined his every interaction. The executioner's duties extended far beyond the single, dramatic act of execution. He was often tasked with a variety of roles that were considered unclean or undesirable by the rest of society, solidifying his outcast status, yet making him indispensable. Imagine him performing these other duties, perhaps acting as the town's knacker, responsible for the quiet disposal of dead animals, removing carcasses from the streets or fields, hauling them away in a simple cart. The sounds would be the creak of the cart, the low murmur of onlookers avoiding his gaze, the pervasive smell of death and decay. Or he might be responsible for the management of the town's refuse, collecting rubbish from designated middens or cleaning the town's ditches and sewers. This was a continuous, monotonous, and profoundly unpleasant task, performed in relative solitude, ensuring a semblance of cleanliness for the citizens who abhorred him. The rhythmic scraping of his shovel, the splashing of foul water, the overwhelming stench, these were the sounds and smells of his quiet, thankless labor. In some regions, the executioner also served as the scavenger of the local prison, responsible for cleaning the filthy cells and disposing of the waste of the imprisoned. Imagine him descending into the cold, damp, dark depths of the castle dungeon, the air thick with the pervasive smell of human waste, damp straw, and despair. His footsteps would echo softly in the profound silence, punctuated by the occasional groan of a prisoner or the soft rattle of chains. This was a grim, repetitive task, performed in solitude, yet essential for preventing the spread of disease within the prison. He might also be the official torturer, responsible for extracting confessions or administering judicial torture as part of a formal legal process. This was a methodical, often slow, application of pain, performed with chilling precision under the observation of officials, a testament to his unique skills, yet adding another layer of cruelty to his professional identity. The executioner's dwelling, as we explored, was almost always segregated, typically located on the absolute periphery of the town or village. This enforced isolation, while seemingly a punishment, also afforded him a unique kind of private space, a quiet sanctuary from the constant scrutiny of others. Imagine his small, humble home surrounded by a high, sturdy fence or a thick, thorny hedge, separating it from the world. The sounds of his family, if he had one, would be contained within a world unto themselves. The distant murmur of the city, its life and vibrancy, would reach him only as faint, unreachable echoes, a constant, poignant reminder of the normal human society from which he was irrevocably separated, yet which depended on his services. This physical and social barrier created a profound sense of psychological protection, allowing him a measure of peace in his isolated existence. The inheritance of the profession, often passed from father to son, created a unique lineage of social outcasts, yet also a strong, internal familial bond. Imagine a young boy growing up in the executioner's hut, slowly learning the grim tools of his father's trade, understanding from a tender age that his future was already set, inextricably linked to a profession that brought both fear and contempt. His father would teach him not just the physical techniques of execution and torture, but also the meticulous art of tool maintenance, the subtle protocols of public ceremony, and most importantly, the profound psychological resilience needed to endure universal rejection. The sounds of his father sharpening an axe, the quiet instructions given in low tones, the rhythmic practice of tying complex knots, these were the lessons of his unique childhood, a silent apprenticeship in a forbidden craft. This inherited duty, while a curse in the eyes of society, also provided a structured path, a sense of identity within a deeply marginalized family. Marriage for the executioner and his children was severely constrained, often only possible within a very narrow specific social circle of other unclean professions. They could not marry into respectable families from the local village or town. Instead, they were often forced to marry within other outcast families, perhaps the executioner from a neighboring town, or families involved in similarly stigmatized professions like knackers, gravediggers, or even prostitutes. Imagine the somber arrangements, the quiet negotiations for such unions, devoid of the joyous celebrations and wide social gatherings of other medieval weddings. The sounds of such a wedding would be subdued, the laughter less boisterous, the guests few and similarly outcast. This ensured the perpetuation of their cursed lineage, a cycle of stigma that was almost impossible to break, binding them to their grim fate, yet also fostering a unique, profound sense of solidarity and shared understanding within their small, isolated community. Despite their profound social rejection, executioners often held certain practical privileges or monopolies granted by their employers. They might have exclusive rights to perform certain unclean trades within the town, such as tanning animal hides, or even running the local brothel, enterprises considered too distasteful for respectable citizens. These privileges, while further reinforcing their outcast status, also provided a crucial means of livelihood, ensuring their economic survival. Imagine the executioner quietly managing his tannery, the pungent smell of curing hides filling the air, his hands busy with repetitive physical labor, performing a necessary service for the townspeople who would not interact with him directly. This paradoxical arrangement, feared yet necessary, despised yet economically sustained, was a unique feature of their existence. The executioner's unique position also gave him a peculiar form of unseen authority. While hated, he was also feared, and this fear often ensured a certain quiet obedience from the populace. His presence, even if silent, served as a constant, stark reminder of the consequences of crime and the power of the Lord. Imagine the subtle shifts in behavior when the executioner was known to be in a certain area, conversations quieting, children being pulled closer, people moving with more caution. This was a power derived not from charisma or social standing, but from the grim nature of his duties, an authority wielded through silence and fear rather than overt displays of force. The pervasive underlying presence of the executioner, woven into the very fabric of medieval society, fostered a unique perspective on justice, fear, and human nature. He was a silent mirror, reflecting society's darkest necessities. His existence, though grim, was a constant reminder of the boundaries of acceptable behavior and the absolute finality of transgressions. The constant rhythm of his isolated life, the quiet maintenance of his tools, the solemn preparation for his duties, and the profound inherited burden of his family all contributed to a unique sense of continuity and order, a quiet acceptance of life's unpredictable currents, even for those at its very bottom. This deep, unchanging rhythm, this quiet harmony amidst life's challenges, will now gently guide your own mind towards a profound and dream-filled sleep, a peaceful surrender to the ancient, eternal patterns of existence.